Alright, welcome back to the New Sentinel. I'm Chukwuka, and today's episode is truly about a knife fight, folks. This isn't your usual 10-year census shuffle. We're in the thick of 2025's voluntary, mid-decade redistricting. Now, you remember last episode we touched on Project 2026 and all that maneuvering, but this is different. States like Texas and California, they're not waiting for the courts to force their hands. The parties are moving shifts themselves, digging in and honestly, turning map-making into high-stakes strategy. Texas, for example, Republicans there are tightening their grip, not just holding ground but actively redrawing lines to protect as much territory as possible while they still can. Then look at California, where Democrats are playing a similar game, but on the other end, trying to claw back at every seat lost in the earlier wave. All voluntary, all calculated. It's really unprecedented.
Yeah, and let me jump in here, 'cause what's really wild is the maze of administration behind it. Some of this redistricting is coming down from court orders, like in North Carolina, where the courts basically tossed out old maps. But you've also got voluntary redraws, and not to get too in the weeds, but there's something else fueling this chaos. President Trump's direct push. He's out there making calls, sometimes literally to state leaders, urgent changes. You get a whole patchwork. Some maps drawn by legislatures, some by courts, a few even by so-called independent commissions, all tumbling into the same melee. It's like watching a chessboard where players just pick up the pieces and start moving them around when they don't like how the game's going. And like, Olga, I know you've been following all the court battles on the ground.
Yes, Ethan, and the litigation is relentless. Every map, especially in states with a history of discrimination or polarization, ends up under legal scrutiny. What you have now, think about Williams versus Board of Elections in New York. Minority communities are fighting back against decades of being packed or cracked out of meaningful influence. As these lawsuits pile up, courts are left sorting through whether new lines comply not just with the Voting Rights Act, but new state-level voting rights protections. If you are a marginalized voter, the uncertainty can be exhausting. And it's not just about process. It's about whether your neighborhood's votes count for anything, or if you're just an afterthought in somebody else's power game.
Yeah, y'all. I'll tell you, having been stationed in Texas during my Army years, this just feels like pre-battle recon. Everybody's adjusting lines, recalculating, just before the shooting starts. It's all about prepping the field. You want to lock down the terrain before first contact. Sometimes it's open combat. Sometimes you're fortifying positions in the dark, hoping the other guy's not doing the same on his side. Same deal here. Every party's jockeying, moving the boundaries, trying to get the tactical advantage before November. Never seen anything quite like this, not in a mid-decade shuffle.
That's a solid analogy, Duke. And to your point, Olga, the Williams case, those plaintiffs, Black and Latino voters in Staten Island and Brooklyn, they are not just fighting for a seat. They are essentially arguing that a third of Staten Island's population is being locked out of power. We keep hearing about independent commissions like New York's trying to keep things fair, but when they hit a deadlock, it goes right to the courts or the lawmakers, and it becomes another battleground. It's chaotic, but with the stakes this high, you can see why everyone's taking up the redistricting knife.
Let's dig into where these maps are actually changing the balance. Texas and North Carolina, as we all know, have given Republicans a real boost. New maps there mean more GOP-leaning seats, especially with Texas deliberately trying to safeguard ground in Dallas-Fort Worth and Houston's suburbs. But California's not taking it lightly. Democrats there moved fast, trying to re-engineer districts in places like the Central Valley that slipped away last cycle. The commissions in California and Utah, they're staging a bit of a comeback for the Democrats. Certain seats go from likely Republican to toss-ups. Meanwhile, Florida and Virginia, the suspense is almost unbearable. Final maps are still pending as lawsuits drag on, and whole campaigns are just waiting to see where the lines ultimately fall.
The numbers get wild, right? If you look at House projections, it's like a balancing act on a razor's edge. Net gains right now seem to be split. Republicans picking up in Texas, North Carolina, but then losing ground where California, maybe even Utah, makes comebacks for Democrats. You can't ignore Missouri either. Slowly but surely, little tweaks keep eating away at blue strongholds, even if it doesn't grab headlines like the others. So we're talking about 20, maybe 30 seats in play, with just a handful of votes likely to tip majority control. No one can get comfortable, not even for a second.
That hits it, Chukwuka. You know, I always see these big cycles as kind of like a chess end game. Early on, you move all your big pieces, but now, with 20 or 30 swing seats, every pawn matters. One misstep, you lose the House, and you mentioned Missouri. Folks underrate little moves like that, but you stack enough of them, and before you know it, your opponent's boxed in. With court cases hanging over New York and the maps in Virginia still up in the air, it's just every piece's move matters. Every legal challenge, every voluntary adjustment could be the difference between keeping the gavel and losing it.
And I'll just say, look, when you got only a few seats making the difference, ain't nobody sleeping. Everybody's campaigning like it's DEFCON 2, right? Doesn't matter if you're a Democrat in Southern California or a Republican in Dallas. If your map flips, you're on full alert. That's how you get maximum volatility. Party leaders are running analytics daily on what to defend, what to abandon, which court ruling might mess up next week's plan. The battlefield changes by the day, not by the year now.
And all of this isn't happening in a vacuum, right? Remember, for communities of color or neighborhoods kept on the margins, this isn't just chess. It's whether their voices are finally heard or once again sidelined. Democrats, especially in the New York Williams case, are arguing these lines don't just move votes, they move the prospects for representation. And like in the California fights, you see if lawsuits create even a single new minority-influenced district, that can tip more than just the numbers. It can change whose issues get prioritized nationally.
So here's where it gets really dicey, folks. Cook Political Report and the rest are saying GOP could barely hang on to a majority, even a single-digit edge, right? That sounds strong, but all it takes is a political flashpoint, scandal, economic wobble, or like a big turnout spike, and that edge collapses. If you watch scenario modeling, call it wargaming, it's clear. You got a razor-thin perimeter, and if enough battalions flip, you're outflanked. That's why both parties are on edge. A tiny breeze changes who's got the gavel.
Exactly, Duke. And we can't underestimate the backlash potential if voters, especially those marginalized, feel the redistricting game is rigged. Take the reactions in California. Public outrage has already driven some commissioners to walk back their changes or even face recall threats. Over in New York, if the Williams case gets traction, you could see legal precedents inspiring other suits nationwide. People remember when the process isn't transparent or feels undemocratic, and that frustration reaches a boiling point fast. All these pending Voting Rights Act cases, even if they just nudge the lines a bit, remind us this isn't just paperwork. This is about trust in the system itself.
And I'll say this from experience. A little story from my Army days. You line up defenses, you pour concrete, you put guards on the walls. But if those on the outside think you've built it just to shut them out, they'll work twice as hard to break in. That's what worries me about these brand new maps. It's not just about legal semantics or party wins. If folks feel cheated at the ballot box, you risk far more than a lost seat. You risk turning frustration into a movement determined to tear down the whole arrangement, one challenge at a time.
Couldn't have put it better. The push-pull between holding ground and losing legitimacy, it's right at the heart of what makes these midterms a powder keg. Voters know when they're being gamed, even if the courts sign off on technicalities. Heck, we've even seen in previous elections, like we mentioned a few episodes back, how a surge in turnout or local backlash can completely upend locked-in projections. At this point, every seat is contested territory, and even a win could evaporate overnight.
Well, folks, if this episode tells us anything, it's that the map mashing ain't slowing down, and November 2026 is looking wild. We'll have to keep our eye on how each ruling, redraw, and voter reaction plays out, 'cause not a single thing's set in stone.
Absolutely, and we'll keep covering the court fights, the communities speaking out, and every line being drawn or challenged up till the last vote's cast. There's still hope for fair maps, though it may take more than just lawsuits to get there.
You're right, Olga. As always, the new Sentinel's not going anywhere. We'll be following the twists, turns, and, let's be honest, surprise knife fights every step of the way. Major, Duke, Olga, thanks for keeping it sharp. Listeners, stay alert, stay engaged, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Y'all take care. Keep those maps handy and your minds sharper. See you next time.
Спасибо, everyone. Always a pleasure to be part of this debate. Until next time.
All right, y'all. Stay frosty and keep your head on a swivel. Out.